Okay.
So you write about the human condition. I have that's a twofold question. Tell us what that means for you. And I don't know why I felt like the intuition to ask you, what is the human condition?
Oh, well. Well, honestly, I think joy and suffering are like the two pillars that we move through in our life, right? And when I was very young, I wanted to be a poet. And so I was really conflicted in the first 3 years of nursing. Like, I have to be a poet. Like, I had to do this path. And Galway Connell was teaching in Hawaii, and I moved to Hawaii to take his classes. And I was really in a lot of turmoil. And he said to me, well, you can go to the library for the next 12 years and write a thesis and be in the academy, or you can just live your life and be a poet in the world. And the minute he said that, I thought, poets should be in the world, right? Poets should be witnessing. So I consider that a big part of my life. And I feel like I've witnessed much more suffering than I have joy, but I do believe that joy drives a lot of people's hope that carries them through their suffering. But suffering to me is kind of like a bedrock. How we deal with it, what form it takes in our lives, that's sort of like, to me, that is the human condition. I mean, it's not super happy, but I do feel like it's what shaped me. And
Right.
so then I felt like I could witness and be present for other people's journey.
Yeah. So Leyden's first thing he said, he read this poem to me before he got on. He said, "Oh my God, this is so dark."
And I love it. And I love her. Okay.
Yes,
It's dark and I love her. All right?
Yes. And,
Yeah.
the thing is, you
It's called.
told me about the tradition a little. You told me a little bit about the tradition of writing from a dark space.
Is this the poem where the girl gets thrown against the fence?
Skirt with strawberry paisley.
Yeah, where was that poem? I didn't think that poem was published anywhere.
I looked it up, and it is the first piece of writing that it was interesting. I looked, and I wanted to see who you were, so I clicked on images, and then there was an image of that poem.
Wow, I'll have to look
from
that up.
Poetry Sunday, another brave poem from Mary Jane Nealon.
Oh, fascinating.
By Women's Voices for Change.
Well, I'm glad it's out there.
Yeah. And I thought it's really beautifully dark, and it's exciting, Mary Jane. It really is in a lot of ways. I'm serious. I mean, you could not have found a better person to enjoy and understand that for the first time we're in our series, you're talking about darkness as a way to kind of lead towards that. In my life, it leads me actually to the light. I can actually see the light because I've acknowledged very deeply the darkness.
And I think that really echoes what I was saying about suffering, right? I mean, so, as a nurse, I have found that certain images just kind of haunt me and stay with me. And that was one. I mean, there's a series. And then until I write about them, I'm really carrying them in a kind of burden. And then when I find a way to put it in a poem or a nonfiction essay or something, it makes no sense to me. Like, right, that girl haunted me for a really long time. And but once I wrote that poem, I felt like it could be released, because those extreme, like people in that kind of extremity, I feel like the world has an obligation to see it and acknowledge it, as well as the fact that this happened in like one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. And it was a thing that, like, suffering went on there every single day. But it was when this thing happened that people kind of took notice of this location, right? So just carrying that, I agree, is a way then to the light, because you go, okay, I think I've made sense of this, or I think I understand at least the process of documenting it as a witness, or, and in particular, the thing that I really struggled with when I was an emergency room nurse was people's clothes that they came in. I'm like, when they picked out this outfit this morning, they had no idea,
Wow.
Like really, truly, because like in oncology and when I worked in AIDS, whatever, people they were sanitized, right? They were in a hospital bed, you had your team around you. But in the emergency room, like, people come in their little outfits that like they loved or cared about when they got dressed that morning. And for me, it was actually too much, like, to stay there very long. I only did it for like a year.
Right.
I am going to introduce Mary Jane right now. It's Mary Jane Nealon. She's a writer. Her book that she wrote a memoir called Beautiful Unbroken, One Nurse's Story. She's written a lot of poetry. She was a nurse for 40 years and talks about her struggles during the AIDS epidemic and writes about that. She refers herself to be retired, but she's never retired. She just sort of moved on to other things. And one of the things we're going to talk about is that you're going to become a full-time writer. You've left nursing, sort of done some consulting, and now going to go on to writing. Mary Jane and I have worked on a project for about 2 years. Mary Jane is one of the few people who knows how to really get mad at me every once in a while. And she gets her Irish up, I guess, right?
Yeah. Pretty much every time we talk.
But we had an amazing collaboration. At some point, we're hoping to sell this project and get it, done in book form. And it was amazing working with Mary Jane in that she's just a wonderful interviewer and a wonderful writer. So, do we miss anything, Mary Jane?
Oh no, thank you, Ed. I work in 45 years though.
So 40. Retired yet?
45 years as a nurse.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or in healthcare.
In healthcare. Got it.
So you're going to become a full-time writer. What do you think that's going to be like for you?
I don't know. Right before I got on, I prepared I need to stop working as soon as possible to my biggest contract as a consultant. And I just said, I have an idea for a transition. I can't do this anymore. I have so many projects that for years I told myself, well, if I just had time. But I realize I've set up my world to not have time, kind of on purpose, I think, on some level. And
time clutter.
And, my family's life expectancy is like 77, 78. Every once in a while, somebody hits 80 and people go crazy, like, how long will she live now? Like, whatever. But I just inherited a very significant thing from this person who was not related to us. And it feels like a miracle in my life that now I don't even really have to work at all. And I never thought that would happen. My parents didn't have 2 cents. So now I'm like, if I keep working, then I'm intentionally avoiding these projects.
Right.
So one is to write about my father, who was the most important person in my life. I have 3 poetry manuscripts that I have not even sent out, and probably 400 pages of other kinds of prose.
Wow.
So I really end my project with Ed and Tamara. So there's so much that I kept telling myself I just had time. And now I see that I have kind of engineered a conflict to that time. whether it's fear of failure on some deep level, or, a fear that I won't apply the same work ethic to that work.
And maybe you don't have, but also, maybe, I don't offer any solutions, but I'm hearing, it seems like, you wouldn't necessarily, one doesn't have to interpret one former life to a future life, and it doesn't have to have the same conditions. I actually told Ed, let's not coach. And here,
there you go, Ed.
I am
sorry,
Ed.
So,
Ed, I apologize profusely to you. I am completely inconsistent. Yeah. No, no, because from the person that wrote that poem and that poetry, I feel like, first of all, I just thought about Joseph Campbell when you talked about, he said, life is suffering with moments of bliss.
I didn't know that.
And that's a very core Buddhist principle, that life is suffering, and navigating this world in this physical body is painful. We're in contact, like sensory, with everything, and sometimes that suit, the human suit, is really, it can be raw.
I was going to take actually a different quote, which was
from Joseph Campbell.
No, from Cheryl Strayed, who wrote Wild, said, "Don't lose your joy over a story that isn't true anymore." So we always get to start our stories from where we are, not from where we have been. At times, we could change that story.
Sure.
Sure. But I think a lot of times, like for me, like starting my own projects, like doing this project with you, was not the fear of failure, but you like saying, well, now I have nothing to do. Am I actually going to do my own project or not?
Yeah, but I can I just say how excited I am about what you said, Leyden, because I think one of the things about when I was young, my father said, you have to have a job where they'll need you in a war or a depression. And that was very Irish, right? Like my whole family are from Ireland. We lost tons of people in the famine. The people that came here to this country were like, be a cop or a firefighter. They can never fire you. And then if you were a woman, be a nurse or a teacher. Same thing. So but there was this work ethic where I would say, oh, I'm so tired and I really wanted to go to Germany. And my father would say, how many jobs do you have? Just one? Because he always worked 2 jobs. And then, and so I do think like my writing life has been really precious, and that time has felt really special. And when you said that, I was like, maybe I'm afraid I'm going to apply that work ethic where it's like chore instead of joy.
Right.
So now that excites me to think about, I can make it look different from the other.
Something, and I want to say this and then ask Ed a question, is one of the things you said really inspired me about, when we're not creative for ourselves, we're afraid of a relationship with ourselves, especially you were talking about the human condition, right? Like this fear of this relationship with myself, like the time that you're, helping other people, it couldn't be more classically opposite. Here's this person mangled physically, that I can do. But now it's this person that I've got to I've got to take care of me. So, I mean, I think self-care and creativity are hand in hand. Yeah. Ed, what's your self-care practice? Like, how do you know when you're consciously, okay, I'm in my way, let me unlock it?
For me, it's really simple. Just go take the camera outside and take a walk.
Gotcha.
And just like, maybe it'll get a little better. Maybe it'll always get a little better. And sometimes, really cool things happen. But so for me, it's just a practice of taking a walk and taking my camera out. And sometimes I don't even take it out of the bag, and sometimes I do. But just starting the practice of walking. So
yeah, when I
walk on his property it helped. It was a good evening. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'll do it in New York City too. You know,
No, I'm just
wherever
saying that I just remembered that as a good memory with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
what do you do, Leyden?
For my practice,
Yeah.
after years and years of being addicted to getting up and being like my life is over, it's horrible, blah 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 blah, I picked up morning pages again. So I will write 3 pages of stream of consciousness, and I will, like, the elephant is floating in the air. I hate myself.
His writing is unbelievably beautiful.
The bed is not going to be made up. Who am I kidding? I'm going to make this bed up. And then I just ramble, and I allow all those dark things that flash into my head. And actually, it's interesting. The more I write, the less dark the writing is. Towards myself specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote a poem recently, and I think what you said, Ed, about going out, when I had a fellowship that was a year, all you had to do was leave the country. They deposited money in your checking account every 3 months, and you just couldn't come back. So you could go anywhere, you just couldn't come back to the country. So I went to Ireland and New Zealand, where I had places to stay. And I was on the Irish Sea in New Zealand and near the ocean in Ireland, I was on the Irish Sea and near the ocean in New Zealand. And I went out every single day. And that's when I wrote my memoir. I would just come back from being outside and just write. So I could totally see how that would work. But the other thing I was thinking of is, I think for my transition, I really need to meditate because I wrote a poem a couple of weeks ago where there was a line in there that said, I find tending to the dead reassuring, peaceful even. And, then go through just like a list of peaceful things like fresh squeezed orange juice. And I want a trash can with a foot pedal. And, it just ends with me like tossing away this bird that had died. And I think when I had worry about being judged about that, but it feels so true to me because the body just feels like this vehicle that ultimately fails us, but that we can, like, there's magic and mystery in caring for people after death. I always loved the ritual of postmortem care, of washing a body and removing tubes, because it felt like really sacred time to me.
Wow.
And if I had a staff member working with me who was saying, like, did you get a lotto ticket? The lotto's up. I'd say, please leave the room. I'll do this by myself. Because I always sacred space. And so, but as far as I know, once I leave this body, I can't write a book of essays.
And Mary Jane, in your writing and in your life, you have a lot of spirituality in it. And even though I know you're not a practicing Catholic
no dogma,
but I actually heard you say something that was really interesting the other day on a podcast, and you said, "Well, when I want to get cleansed, I'm not sure how you put it. You really like putting yourself in the river and in water, and that's a big practice for you." And I'm thinking, "Wow, she doesn't realize she's going through a baptism each time."
No. Any body of water. I think what it is tying to the time before birth. Connecting to the spirit that we came from. More than baptism. Organized religion terrifies me. I don't judge anybody who believes in it, but I feel like it's just a mechanism for danger.
It certainly has been used that way. It certainly has been exploited. Yeah, of course. So wait a minute. I completely lost track of a thought. I can't believe it. No, it's really. So you're saying that your girl with the strawberry paisley skirt. Let's just go back for one moment. You talked about your practice of creativity. So how would you outline is like with the poetry and having witnessed what you're saying a lot of very rich stuff that I don't think a lot of people talk about. The care of the body post-mortem as a way of cleansing to prepare to move forward. Then you're able to witness what is sheer gore and disaster of the mangled body, and also need to unburden it when it's in that state. So like for you, is there one way towards that creative act of like one way you unburden by letting it go, like something that's kind of made an imprint? Are there other things? Are there other ways that like you took your water and then you wrote about your memoir, or your walk? What
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mentioned this on this other podcast, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but one of the most powerful things that happened to me when my brother died of cancer. And then while he was dying of cancer at Sloan Kettering in New York, I took a job there. Like, it was ridiculous. Somebody should have been like, this may be a boundary issue, but I didn't, and that's when I really started working with young people with catastrophic illness. And one night I had to run a urine sample down to the lab, and it was like 10 o'clock at night. Everything was pretty much shut down. And Sloan Kettering doesn't really do emergencies unless it's a young person with like a catastrophic diagnosis, and then they open things up. So I'm running down this hall, and all of a sudden I see this beautiful young girl from the back with like this cascading brown hair, and her arms are out like this in front of a CAT scan machine. Now I know immediately it's catastrophic, or she wouldn't be here at 10 o'clock at night. She still has her hair, so she's just finding out. And I literally carried that image with me from 1977 until 2000. And I was trying to find something to juxtapose it, something to help me understand it took my breath away when I saw her. And so I would mentally sit down and try to write about it and think maybe it was my brother, maybe it's all young people, maybe nothing felt right. And then in 2000, I was in North Carolina, and a friend of mine who's a Buddhist monk started telling me the story about this thing he experienced when he was a child. And he said, I was really haunted because from my bedroom window, I saw a dog in the alley, and I couldn't tell if the dog was sleeping or had died. And I said to him, excuse me, just a minute. And I literally ran to this room where there was a computer, and I typed human-headed bull below empty space. And then I wrote this poem in like 2 minutes, like as fast as I could type. I wasn't thinking about it. And then like 2 months later, I entered it in a contest. It won this contest.
Wow.
Like, I never edited a word of it. And people were like, oh, how long did it take you to write that poem? And I'm like, 23 years. Because it was doing the work, right? It was just trying to find its partner in the world where I could understand it first and then explain it.
So how many of those kind of images do you have inside you that are waiting to get out when you go full-time creative?
I would say the biggest number of images that I'm still carrying around are from the AIDS epidemic. Oh. And I have written about the epidemic, but in just the last few weeks, I've written 3 poems about that time. There's something about COVID that kind of stirred it up. Something about monkeypox that scares me, the kind of judgment and stigma of a community again. And I had
It's not even a fucking STD, excuse my language.
Oh, I know. It's like, okay.
don't even start. I'm getting my 1 of 2 tomorrow morning. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah, it just infuriates me. I'm like, stop it. But I had a dream, and it's the time in my life that I still cannot easily talk about without crying. And so I pay attention to that, right? Undone work. But when I worked in research, we took photos of people with KS, and every week in their underwear like this, and then turned around in the back, very vulnerable position. And then you'd count the lesions. And of course, in the beginning, I mean, I did the AZT placebo trial. Nobody was getting better. And the lesions just grew and grew and grew. So I had a dream the other night that I went into a theater, and there was a man sitting at the bottom of the theater, and there were no chairs or aisles. And so it was really scary because the floor was tilted. And I knew somehow that he had all those Polaroids in this box. And I've always worried about what happened to them. Like, did they just get destroyed? It felt really wrong if they did. And so I make my way down to him, and I said, can I please have those? And he said, oh, well, and he asked me a question, and I just started saying all their names, and all their names came back to me.
Wow.
Dream. And then he said, oh, they're all alive. And then he opened the curtain, and they were all standing there without a blemish. And I said to myself in the dream, what do I do now with all this joyous time?
Wow.
Because that sense of, oh, what would I have felt about the world if I hadn't seen that? Even though I feel really blessed to have been on that journey, it just suddenly, and it also wasn't just me. What would have happened if all of that life had continued in its partners and in its, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is the first thing that I'm going to tackle when I start writing, is really just trying to get memories down, even if I don't, it's like the first person who did a biohazard tattoo, so he could just be out on the dance floor and not worry about disclosure.
Right.
Just lots of things like
now.
that.
Do you keep all these memories inside you, or are they written down somewhere?
No, well, they're mostly in me. I mean, they get written down like when they get written down, but there's always more. I mean, 44 years, 45.
Right.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Well, I think. Well, I just want to affirm for you that I've got your back, because I think there can be a lot of shame associated with discussing things that appear to those people that are not evolved, that you're being negative when you're not. You know what I mean? Like like the human condition, as is it's feeling and touching and being a part of the world. And it has you're making a proposition where you're saying, I'm going to be completely present for this lifetime. I'm going to and also just like the healer part. I want to talk about this kind of healer part of you. And I'm just wondering, I never thought of as nurse or a doctor as a healer, because I've had my own kind of experiences, with certain administrative types. Not everybody's a Mary Jane Nealon. So there's a lot of people that are just like, it's a wheel, and I felt that in the healthcare system. So I think, and also I think it's a really beautiful, interesting concept of that, taking that, what was that period? I came into my sexuality as a queer man during a time when, the proposition was to use a condom even for oral sex. I came in, I was like, well, why would you even bother? Well, I came out and I was 18 in 1988, and that's what they were telling us, Ed.
Right.
That I came out in the time when, if wrap it up from head to toe, right? And I just thought, and you know what? Most of us just said, "Fuck it," to be honest, because the truth is that we needed to touch and feel each other. So I mean, I'm really taken by this, and I hear stories about this period of time where you're visiting 3 people in the hospital at the same time. One hospital and you've got 3 friends that might be all passing from AIDS at that time. So I'm happy that the whatever communities that can relate to that will have you will have your voice and your words to kind of tackle, and in that way they can deal with it as well.
Well, and then in the evening, you'd go see people in the hospital, and then you'd go to a wake at night, and then, or 2 wakes. Like there was that place on Madison and 80.
Oh yes, and
something. It was the only place that would embalm people in the beginning. I'm just blanking on the name of the funeral home. And you'd go in the evening and you'd be like surrounded by research nurses and doctors, because it was the one thing you could do would be to go to acknowledge that you had completely failed them. Right. I mean, so I'm just trying to remember the funeral home, but anyway.
It was funny because I lived in the 2 blocks from the Castro in San Francisco from 1978 to like 1982.
Oh, wow.
And I was the only straight guy who worked at a company of about 30 people, and just to see the devastation that was just like, wow.
At the very begining, Ed.
And supposedly patient 0 lived was from the Castro, and I had a few friends. I had one guy I worked with very closely who passed away. He's one of the first victims of AIDS, and he was a very funny guy. And John, and it was at the color lab that we're at, and so. If you want to read about this, read Beautiful Unbroken. I'm just going to give you a little plug on this. It's just an amazing journey.
Well, I mean, the powerful thing in my life, right, was I made a commitment to stay in that work for a long time. And then at some point it left, like the little nice Sloan Kettering, Cornell, everybody has insurance, everybody works for Valentino, to the street. Right. And I went and worked in the Bowery and in a homeless shelter for men with AIDS. 3 of those men are still in touch with me, found me on Facebook. But they would have died because they were men of color whose family had talked to them about Tuskegee and all sorts of mistrust.
Right.
And they were not trusting viral load tests or CD4 tests, because they were saying to me, like, the man wants to take my benefits away. So he's gonna find out my viral load's undetectable and say I'm not sick anymore. And I'd be like, oh my God, So we did a lot of work with poets from the East Village, a playwright. I just had people come in and do art with them to build trust, because I thought nothing I can say about medicine is going to break through. People are going to want to really reconsider because they want to live. And this one guy in particular, like, I love him, and he is DJ Mr. Right. And, does DJing from his basement. But during the day, he works with insurance claims for people with HIV. And he spent an hour one night trying to convince me how much I would like crack if I would just try crack. Because it was like a harm reduction facility. So lots of people were still using. And I'd be like, I'm not going to ever try crack. So now he's been, in recovery for since 1995 or 96, and had completely changed his life. So I felt like an obligation to not stay in like the ivory tower with insured people when you had people dying in much greater numbers because they were disenfranchised from that.
Right.
So I still feel strongly about, and we saw that in COVID, which is the other thing,
Yes.
right? The healthcare disparities and
No, it was a little difficult. Ed, I don't know what your relationship was like with losing people, but we lost like 5 people. And a lot of people that I know who are not African from the diaspora or brown, they didn't have that similar story. They might have known someone who knew someone, but it didn't touch. Like my uncle died within the same month, within the March of 2020. So I can I totally get what you're saying. So how does that? Let me ask you a question. Like, being a woman, like you're being a white woman, right? Who I don't know where your sexuality lies. What drew you to that particular, what around the race? What it was just like, this is obviously wrong. I need to be a part of the solution. Where do you come at it from?
So you know where that came from? I was writing for a pharmaceutical advertising company for 5 weeks. 5 weeks. I took home $15,000. It was one project took me about 2.5 hours, and they were like, "No, you have to bill 60 hours because that's what Bristol Myers Squibb will pay." And I was like, "Oh, this is so dirty,"
Right.
And so I was looking at the want ads in the New York Times one day, and it said, nurse case manager for 315 Bowery. Well, I knew that was where CBGB's was, right? It's the shelter above CBGB's. $40,000. I mean, this was when my old job was paying like 6 figures.
Right.
So I thought, well, I've already made 15,000. Like I can live on 55,000. So I went into my boss and I said, I'm going to finish this current paper and then I'm done. And he's like, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go work at the Bowery. I hadn't even applied for the job yet.
And you knew you were getting that job.
Well, I was like, because they're going to be astounded when I apply. Right. Well, it was literally, I was, to use your words, the only white woman. And I would basically come in and the security guards on each floor would start singing, I'm in love with Mary Jane. And that's how they would know I was up there. But for me, it was just because I was there and I was respectful, right? That's all it took. Like people would try to play games with me. And, one night there were like 3 little mice and this guy was like, the white man has sent rats. I was like, they're mice. Like, I'm not going to.
They're not rats.
They're not rats. They're mice. But it was, in my whole career, it was the time I felt most blessed to really have that door open. Like, I felt like I had, if I just showed up every day, took a lot of grief. This one guy tried to kill himself and I called 911 and saved his life. Well, he decided then that he wasn't going to talk to me. So I'd be like, hey, G. And he'd be like, and all the other guys would watch. And so finally one day I was like, hey, so forgive me for saving your life. Like I just went off. Like if you were just real with people, I'm like, this is exhausting. Like I should have just let you go. But that, just being real and being respectful, and that then I got the beauty of people really sharing some really difficult things in their life and letting me in as like a partner to, I don't know.
And writing about it, does that give you some kind of completion? What is writing doing for you? I mean, because that's what we're talking about is the creative process.
Yeah. I think there's 2 ways. I think there's the individual and then there's the systems. So like when you asked me, is nursing creative? I retired as the director of innovation. And part of my job was to say, this person's had this experience because this is broken. How can we fix it? At least for this community. And so I think listening to people's stories and then thinking about like, why is this happening over and over and over again? And what could we do that would be creative that would change the system? So a simple example is that people in foster care, we started a project called KELP, Kindness, Elegance, and Love Project, based on this guy at Mayo Clinic who said the healthcare system I envision is one of kindness, elegance, and love. And we found in Missoula, children being put into foster care were often moved from foster care into adoption. Foster parents got tons of help and support that did not exist for the biological parents. So I said, no. I had 32 different partners within a month and a half, county attorneys, prosecutors, child welfare people, psychiatrists. And we tried to do this project. And what became really clear to us is every single person who got referred to us, biological parent who'd lost their child, had been a foster child.
Wow.
So now in our healthcare system, if you're a new patient, you are asked, were you ever touched by the foster care system? Because we know we have to make sure that we help keep your family intact and do what we can before you lose custody.
Right.
So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that to me, that's like not just the microscopic, but
yeah, that's creativity using to like have dynamic solution, like to think about like patterns and unbreaking them and, and creating and burying in other practices the solutions that last longer, and more sustainable. So that is that's highly creative. That's highly creative.
So you see yourself going from one creative field to another creative field. And it's just an extension. So you've already been a full-time creative your whole life then.
Exactly.
The base of this interview is that you were someone who was going to become full-time creative. You're just moving into a different creative field.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty clear to me,
It's so funny listening to Mary Jane do interviews for a long time, for the last 2 years. Her nursing every once in a while comes in there. If someone's really in pain, like my instinct is let it go. Let's hear what they got to say.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean your instinct?
Let's hear what they're going to say. Okay. And Mary Jane once in a while have this. Oh, I need to fix this. I feel that pain in a really deep way, and you can see it just on her face. And she'll just say, "Oh, it's going to be okay." It's going to be okay, and that healing part of her,
right,
will come right in the interview. And once I said to Mary Jane, I said, you know what? I'll never know what they said we're going to say next.
Yeah, it's like, why didn't you just let them keep going? But it's hard.
Yeah,
hard to do.
It was Clarissa, I think. Was that her name? Yeah. And just talking about what it was like. I can't wait to. Did you write about that one yet? I thought that was such a great interview. About
how if her children, what would happen to her children if she died?
Yeah, like we'd never get to see her, and they wouldn't get to know her, and she would just be this memory.
Yeah, and I was like, I was like, and I started talking about
you can see
pre-verbal memories.
you were
how are you doing?
Right. Amazing. So, do you believe in? Do you? I know you don't. No religion. What about archetypes?
Well, I wouldn't say no religion. The Sogyal Rinpoche, who wrote the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying.
Okay.
During the AIDS epidemic, I went to see him in New York, and I was really burnt out and traumatized. And a friend of mine dragged me to this discussion with him. And I sat through it and I was like, I have to go home. I'm exhausted. And my friend's like, no, I want you to meet Sogol. I know him from Santa Barbara. I'm like, whatever. So she's dragging me up there and I'm like literally broken down. And she goes, Sogol, this is my friend Mary Jane. She works with people with AIDS. And he came over to me and he literally just held my hands in his hands, looked at me for like a minute, and then went like that. And then my friend's like, I got you his book. And I'm like, great. Now it's like 9:00 at night. I just want to go home. I take the book. I go home. I go to bed. I had two of the most extraordinary dreams I've ever had in my life. And they were like narrated, right? And I woke up in the morning and I remembered the narration. I started writing it down. I called my friend and I said, oh my God, the most extraordinary thing. We always say Jungian alert. Like, I'm like, listen to this dream. And she goes, oh, Sogol gave you those. They're both in the book.
Wow.
And I swear to God, they are both in the book. And so at that moment, I thought, I absolutely believe in
a higher power,
whatever it is, because
so, yeah, different between being religious and spiritual, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. When I was young, my mother used to say, remember, a priest is just a man. She would say that to me all the time. So I always saw like organized religion as just like obstructing my direct engagement.
Right.
So Leyden, Mary Jane expressed that she has spirituality when she writes in the human condition. My spirituality comes out just in meditation of photography at times, and just creating stuff, and even just it's trying to inspire other young photographers. What gets you going during the day?
You're talking about in a very particular way.
Yeah,
you know what flashed into my head? I hadn't seen the night sky since COVID. So I was upstate New York 2 weeks ago, and at about 2:00 in the morning, like I just went outside on the deck, no lights out on the deck in my friend's house up in Germantown, and I looked at the stars. And that's the one place that when I'm feeling very physical and very human, that if I look into the blackness of the sky with those light dots, I'm like, yes, thank you. I'm in part of something much greater and bigger than myself. That's when I can get, but to say that my brain is a bit of an echo chamber. So I need that drastic environmental change. I'm such a city boy. So I was going to, I'm such a city kid, you know.
I think all three of us are city people.
We're city. And I've started to realize that it's, I have to get those breaks. Your New Zealand, your island trips, I need to spend much more time outside of my my habits in the city more and connect with nature.
Yeah.
You know.
And Mary Jane. I'm sorry.
Well, my bedroom faced the World Trade Center, as you know, Ed, on the Jersey City side. And I was right above the ferry in one of those buildings. And a couple nights after the towers fell, I woke up and I was like, oh, now what? Now what? What is this light? Because I thought it was like a searchlight from a plane or something. It was the moon.
Wow.
And then I was like, I can't live here anymore. I have to, where I'm like, what is that? You know?
Wow.
You know what's funny?
It was always eclipsed by the building, and the way it just arced, it just never, you just never had a view of it.
Never had a view of it. Yeah.
Interesting.
And what's amazing is I know all the, Mary Jane has a dad story. She has so many different stories about veterans, and you have years of writing in front of you.
We hope.
I'm sure. And so what are you think the challenges of getting all these stories, of going full-time writing?
Yeah, I do think I'm going to need some kind of structure, but I want to work something like the pool or some external thing, a walk with the dogs first. I said walk with the dogs. They both like, I'm like, nope.
WLK with the DOGs. I know. I got mine here. She's passed out.
Yeah. But I think I'm going to have to be methodical and be like, this is a poetry day. This is a nonfiction day. Like, I am going to have to do that around revising work that I already have. And then maybe give myself like the ability, if I feel pulled to new work, to just do the new work and stop the other organizing. But
right, but I love what you said about starting your day walking, just finding a practice that gets your day started, to sit in front of a blank page. I don't have that issue. I'm just reinterpreting the world through a camera. I go like this for a living, And
I almost never just sit in front of a blank page, though. What I do, like, this is a really great book I'm reading now, Philip B. Williams' Mutiny. Like, I'll just pick and say, like, he has this, I've looked at this before. When you were mine, though not mine at all permanently, just a body for loneliness. And then that poem is called Hunter. Then I might just type, when you were mine, though not mine at all permanently, and then keep writing. And then at the end, I'll go back and either take that line away or I'll make it like an epigram.
Oh my God, you have a how-to book in you too.
Well, it's not even a how-to. I would say it's not a how-to book. It's sort of an looking for inspiration.
Absolutely.
In other places, and using people who inspire you to start inspiring yourself, almost like a mentor in a way.
I do have a book called Death, a Primer. And and I have 38 chapters outlined, and it's really funny. Like what to expect when you're expecting to die. And then there will be blood, stuff about shit. I don't know a person who really deals with a significant illness that doesn't shit in their pants.
Right.
And it's never bothered me. It's never bothered me. And I, like, every once in a while, I say that to somebody and I realize, oh, I don't think everybody thinks that way. But I do think people are so overwhelmed by the bodily decline that they run to the hospital or the emergency room, and then they wind up not having the death they really wanted, which was to be at home. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, so we can be funny and compassionate and give people a guidebook for what to expect, obviously not if there's a car wreck or something, but if you're dealing with a long illness that's going to end in death and you're palliative care, hospice, these are the kinds of things that somebody should tell you about.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. I think
it's funny. I just went through the death of my sister-in-law and my wife's sister, and we did talk about that. And I said to Lauren, if I get to that point, hire a nurse. I said, just spend all our money. Just if you have to clean up after me that way, do not do that.
That was your line in the sand. That's not where you.
That was my line in the sand. And I said, I don't want you to do this.
Yeah.
And it came up because this happened 3 weeks ago, and Susie's husband dealt with that. And that wasn't his line in the sand.
That wasn't his line in the sand. Yeah, I don't know if I have anybody in my life that I'm that intimate with, or share that love that will require. And I don't know how much of a healing nature I am with my friends. I don't know. That's why I was asking about archetypes.
Oh, I think you're a healing person, Leyden. You got to take a time out for a second, buddy. Okay. So he has taught me so much about vulnerability in terms of my own vulnerability. So you are amazing that you just put your stuff out there and you just say what pisses you off, what makes you happy, what your fears are. Almost better than anybody I've ever met in a lot of ways, And So I've learned more about, and then I started sharing my stories with you. And Leyden will say to me, "Oh, I never heard you say that before. Oh, I never heard you." How many times does that happen when you say that?
Yeah, no,
and
because you're
from, that's stuff that I've learned from you, hanging out with you. That it's okay to say that stuff.
Well, yeah, okay, fair enough. You're right. I think I was talking about a very specific thing that I've also had fears around, which is that intimacy and the vulnerability of cleaning someone's body when they're feeling vulnerable as well. You're right. I do trust myself that I do have a healer. I am a healer. There's another type of healer who can wash a body and wash people and not shame them for being where they're at physically. And I guess that's where my own line in my sand, for me, I get fearful around that level of fragility. I don't love to see people that I love very much sick. And it really, really, really hurts. Yeah. It really, really, really hurts.
I think, I've talked to a psychiatrist about this for the book, the healthcare book I wanted to write. And I wanted to write that before COVID. And when COVID came, I was like, oh, nobody's going to want a healthcare book. But we talked about how shame exists for the person who's suffering and for the person who's caretaking sometimes. And I had a poem really early in my life that got published in the Paris Review that's had the line something like, all body fluids are beautiful, even mucus, even shit. And I meant it. Like, to me, it's just another part of like the things between our spirits, right? And I've said this for years and years, but I believe it with my whole heart and soul. Like, one of the mistakes we make as a culture is we say for baptism, christenings, graduations, weddings, we say, we request the honor of your presence at, and we decide who we want to share those moments with. Right. But we don't do it around failures of the body. And I also think people need to laugh more about how ridiculous and horrible the body is when it starts to fail us. My father was like a big, tough Irish cop and really believed in service. Or he said, a life without service has no value. So I never saw his body, and he was living with me when he was dying of cancer. And he's like, "Ooh, Mayor, ooh," like he wasn't going to make it to the bathroom. And so I literally am like pushing him through, like with the walker. We're like, go. And I get him in front of the toilet and I pull his pants down. He like shits everywhere. And he's like holding on to my shoulders. Aww. And he goes, "Well, who would have thought we'd end up here?"
Oh, so you have completely traits in the DNA that got transferred.
Exactly. And we just laughed and laughed and laughed. And I do think it's pretty common among Irish people. Like, I don't know. I mean, Irish people, we talked about death all the time at the dinner table,
Did that scare you when you,
No, we had like my grandmother, my great aunt, they die. I got in bed with my great aunt when she was in a coma, like night after night. I just curled up with her, like that sense that this is totally natural.
My personal experience as a Afro-Caribbean, from people from Trinidad, that African part of our ancestry that comes, there's like somehow, and I think it's totally ridiculous, somehow the fact that someone's dying has come to us as a surprise to everybody. You know what I mean? And like no, and Ed, you don't know what I've been kind of sprinkling, because I have someone I've been kind of sharing a little bit, but it is so shocking to me, like throwing yourself down on the floor and carrying on. And person was like 85. It's like, I gotta tell you, I think that's a pretty robust life. Like, I don't know if we need to be wailing because they died of natural causes. I'm not sure.
Well, but some of those things are just cultural, though.
Yeah,
you know?
what happens is that but what happens though for me is that I feel overly taxed from something that feels that could be dealt with naturally. That's my controlling stuff, though.
Right. Yeah. That's because, like, when I see that someone really give it up for, someone who passed away, I'm saying, man, that's how it should be done, you know. And I'm thinking,
right. And
what happens in my culture is a little sniffle, you know, and you know, and
keep it all
and some shame, and what am I going to do now? So
well, you know Tim Russert from Meet the Press.
Yes,
God rest his soul. I collapsed a couple of years ago from dehydration. It was like 3 years ago. I'd worked 12 hours at the clinic, had a Coke Zero with caffeine. So basically had like no fluids for 12 hours, no food for 12 hours. I come home and I'm cutting up chicken for my dogs. Like I didn't even stop and sit down and have a glass of water. So I'm like cutting up chicken and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, anyway, I go down. And as I'm going down, I thought, oh, I wonder if this is how Tim Russert died. And then I looked at the dogs and I go, I wonder if they're going to eat me. But like I had no fear. And then I didn't. Thank God I didn't die. And, crawled to a chair and called a friend and we went to the emergency room and I was just dehydrated. Of course, they did every kind of workup. But I was really both reassured and disappointed, like that was the experience. And I said to my doctor, I'm a poet. I thought I would have had like a really deep thought. And she said, listen, don't worry, you'll have another chance.
Maybe it just wasn't my time, but I had spinal meningitis, got paralyzed, almost died. And I thought I was like fighting like hell. And I guess until you're ready to give it up, you're not going to see that, whatever it is.
You were conscious of your fight?
I was conscious that when I was conscious that
you were meant to stay.
I was unconscious for a while, but when I was conscious, I was like, I was thinking about photography. I was thinking about the things I wanted to do next in photography. And finally, 11 days later, when I got out of the hospital, I'm such a crazy person that I didn't even tell this client of mine that I was sick and dying in bed. I'd lost 40 pounds, through spinal meningitis. And I showed up at the job, and he's like, "Oh." I had an eye patch on there. He's like, my one eye was paralyzed.
Oh my God! Talk about work ethic.
Yeah, I showed up, and he's like, and I'm looking at him and like, well, this is what I do, and he's like, I think, are you okay? It went fine, but yeah, I don't think I was ready because I think I saw something dark, and I was like running away. I was running toward the light of life as opposed to I was not ready to go apparently, and I want to. We're winding this up, and I want to talk just about your creativity and and we talked about a lot of your career, but what are you going to be writing about? Like, what is your process going to look like going in the future? Now that you're going to be doing this full time, the things you're going to write about, or you're just going to let it come to you?
No, I think the first thing I would do is, like I said, I have these poetry manuscripts that I haven't even sent out. And I do have somebody who's a really wonderful poet who's reading my current one. But I have a serial killer poetry manuscript called Four Darks in Red, after the Rothko painting. And it's like the killer, the girls, the detective. And it's just kind of like it was a fun thing to do. And I wrote that like 15 years ago, and it's just sitting in a drawer. So I think what I'm going to do is actually just get those things sent out. And then they have their job. And then I'm going to look at my prose, because I have a lot of prose about my father. I have prose about nursing. I have prose about love. And I do have a poetry manuscript just about my old boyfriend who was in a car wreck and just brain fried, not necessarily dead, but I do think there's, for me internally, I'm just going to say this, Leyden, because I feel like you've been really open. I have spent a lot of my life people thinking I was a lesbian because of the work I've done. And, I told this one patient one day, he goes, "Oh, I see you're wearing comfortable shoes." I'm like, "It's all I've ever worn." He's like, "Really?" I said, "Since kindergarten." And so then sees one of my colleagues and
That's
says,
amazing.
and she's like, "Why did you tell Barry you were a lesbian?" I'm like, "I didn't, whatever."
I said I wore comfortable shoes.
But I am like where you said, I don't have an intimate partner, male or female. I do have friends that would do anything for me, but not that, probably not like move me into their house. And I think part of why I haven't been in an intimate relationship that's been successful, no matter how long it's lasted, has been because I'm much more comfortable with the crisis of the suffering and the dying person than I am in the joy, right? I'm a little unsure about how to stay in joy for a long time. So that's something I want to explore more, in my writing, and then thinking about kind of the risk that you take. So like when I had that dream and said, what would have happened? What would I have done with all this joyous time? It's a question I actually have about the life I've chosen to live. I don't regret it, but I think there's a price, that.
Yeah. And there's also the definition. I got to tell you, if what all the stories you told us tonight equates into your passion and what you were meant to do, I heard joy in everything you were doing.
Yeah.
I kind of did. I got to tell you, I didn't, the circumstances, the medium might have been death, blood, and flesh, and piss and shit. However, you were joyfully doing it. I don't know. That's what I didn't get. I didn't get like a complaining nurse, like, why are these people bothering me? I heard you really saw them as medium, and I'm also really, I have a question. I know we're winding down. Do you ever consider teaching?
Teaching writing or teaching?
Yeah, teaching writing, or how to actually, because I think it is a genre, right? You are talking about a specific thing. I would definitely take your class, because I like films that doing right now. I'm going through The Killing. I don't know if you know that television show.
Yeah.
Series. So right now I gravitate towards that kind of thing. And actually, I'm such a dark snob that I think that if you're not talking about something like small talk, for me is like ridiculous. Like,
that's why we're doing the podcast together. Leyden and I each hate small talk.
I can't.
We don't know how to do it.
Like if you AIDS, like I can walk into the room and say "fuck AIDS." You know what I mean? Let's start talking about it right now. Before I can go like, yeah. And did you hear that politician and Trump and I cannot do it. And
it's so funny. It's why I had such a hard time in high school. I didn't know how to do small talk.
No,
and I was like a loner. I said, "Can we talk about art and photography?" And So anyway, Leyden, Mary Jane just answered that question. Can you answer that question?
Which question is that?
About intimacy and I mean, for me, just real quickly, when I'm not in a relationship or married at a particular, I am a mess.
Interesting. I got to tell you, I think I'm more inclined to have like 3 to 4 lovers all around the world. And that's what I really want as part of my vision. That doesn't mean that one of those people isn't something else. I guess it happened when I turned 50. I don't know why that. I was like, what are you prescribing yourself to? And unlock your mind about what it means to relate to other people. And I enjoy less time with one person.
Well,
I know I shouldn't. I feel like this is like anti-popular culture. Like I enjoy like, okay, yeah, we did 3 days. Ciao.
I mean, and part of it, Leyden just has gotten out of a long-term relationship.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. 6.5 years, and I loved him, but when I really thought about like it was total magical thinking that it was going to work because of his circumstances and not being out, and I have to be with men, plural, that have accepted their sexuality and present as who they are. And so I was basically in a 6.5 year relationship with someone who wasn't out.
I'm going to ask one last question.
Okay.
Which is, Mary Jane, do you have any questions for us?
Well, I just want to tell Leyden that I have thought about teaching, and that is something I would love to do. And oh my God, if we were in a class together. But not at the university.
Leyden, can you send her that poem you read? Leyden is an amazing writer. And
yes, I really want to connect with you.
His writing reminds me of your writing a little bit. And he read me the first piece he wrote. I was like, oh my God, how are you not writing full time? And Mary Jane, don't teach for a while.
Yeah, you're right. No. And the only reason I was saying is that, or maybe it's like individual writing coaching, you know what I mean? For some of us who are like,
Leyden told me not to coach during the session.
And I'm doing it.
And Leyden is like,
for those who are listening to Matt.
He said, you get very defensive at it. He said, what do you mean? Yeah, what do you mean don't coach? And then, of course, he wanted to coach today.
I'm so glad about that.
So for those who are listening to Mad Creative now, we are here with Mary Jane Nealon, and of course myself with Ed Lederman are in conversation with this brilliant, dark, wizard dress of death. I want to give her title. All right, and honor that and the joy that it brings you.
Oh, I'm pretty excited to have that title. I feel like I've waited all my life.
Yeah, the wizard dress of death. Okay, right. I want you to be completely amazing with that. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed your writing, and I look forward to hearing more and reading more.
And
thank you.
Before we get off, Mary Jane, where could we find your work, or what's coming up?
Yeah, well, my book, Beautiful Unbroken, One Nurse's Life, is available on Amazon. It's from Grey Wolf Press. And then I have 2 poetry books from Four Way Books, Rogue Apostle and Immaculate Fuel, and they are often available on Amazon, but they're very old. And then on the Sun Magazine website, I have 5 essays that they've published over the years, and they're on their website for free.
I did take a picture of Beautiful Unbroken next to the Eiffel Tower a few weeks ago to Mary Jane.
Exciting.
So,
what an honor. Thank you both so much.
Before we get up, Leyden, where are we going to, what do we want to know?
Right now, in my design practice, we're working on a couple of high-end residential projects, and hopefully a new one. And you can find me at LeydenLewis.com. That's LeydenLewis.com. And it's Leyden Lewis at Leyden Lewis Design Studio for Instagram.
And anything else? Any cool projects you have going on, or?
Well, the coolest project that I have that's in the works, but is waiting for funding, is my first independent structure, freestanding structure that's supposed to be made out of rammed earth in Khartoum, Sudan.
And you might be on TV.
Might be on TV. Yeah.
So, and you can reach me at edlettermanphoto.com and edlettermancoaching.com. And the coolest thing that's happened to me in the last few weeks, I was doing an I Am Pay project, and I got to hang on to his glasses for a while and just move them around, and I had them for about an hour. And
whose glasses? John Lennon?
I Am Pay, the architect, the famous architect.
Oh.
And so that was like, oh wow! I mean, because he's very well known for his glasses.
Yeah.
So to have that, to have them for about an hour and photograph, it's going to be in an exhibit in Hong Kong at the Kowloon M Plus gallery sometime in the future. They're very secretive about that, but so anyway, thank you, Mary Jane. That was amazing, and
Thank you so much.
You are amazing.
Amazing.
So I'm going to turn off the recording real quick, and we'll.
Okay. Thank you.
Sound editing and theme music by Will Ainsley. Brian Rzepko was basically our mentor who really taught us all the technicals, showed us how to get this online. We would not be here without Brian, so thank you, Brian. The logo is by Leyden Lewis and Sharon McLaughlin of Mermaid, New York City. And if you're creative, we would love to hear from you. We would love to email us your story, and if we like it, we would love to have you on. We are looking for creatives to tell their story, what their challenges are, what they love about working in the creative field, what is working for them. So until next time, I hope you guys listen. This podcast is for you. Thanks.